introduce the speakers. This morning, we are having a talk on a future sustained tropical Pacific observing system for research and forecasting. And our speakers are Toshio Suga and Katie Hill. Toshio Suga is the chair of the GOOS WCRP Ocean Observations Panel for Climate, the OPC, which serves GOOS as the Physical Variables Panel. He is professor in the Graduate School of Science at Tohoku University and team leader in the Ocean Climate Change Research Program of JAMSTEC in Japan. And Katie Hill is the technical coordinator, the secretariat for the OPC. She's based at the Secretariat of the Global Climate Observing System at the World Meteorological Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. Before she was in this position, she was the scientific officer in the Integrated Marine Observing System, IMOS, of Australia, and she has a PhD in oceanography. And I think Katie and Toshio will be joining us by video shortly. Here comes Katie. And we'll look for Toshio to join us. And I'm actually just going to switch over. I'll just remind everyone of the format of the webinar. We'll have this presentation from Toshio and from Katie for about 30 minutes. And then I will ask participants to ask questions through a chat window which will pop up. You do have an access to a chat window right now. You'll see at the lower right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for clarification that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and type it. But otherwise, please hold on to your more substantive questions to ask after the 30-minute presentation. So thank you again for joining us, and I will turn it over to Katie to start the presentation.
Slight technical challenge here, just a minute.
Yeah, so this presentation was on screen, it just popped off.
All right, so I'll start as my presentation is re-uploading. Just to give some background, as OOPC has revitalized and regenerated, the panel has been charged with really taking this systems approach to observing system design and evaluation, exercising the framework for ocean observing concepts. And so we are expecting that there will be a number of observing system evaluation and design type activities focused on this kind of approach. And the first one that was really taken on was the Tropical Pacific Observing System, and the timing and urgency of this was precipitated really by the challenges in sustaining the mooring array across the Pacific. So that was really what precipitated the rather ambitious and aggressive time frame in which this activity was spun up. And I know that a lot of people were interested in it and were maybe not able to contribute or to be involved as much as they would like, but I assure you there's going to be plenty of opportunity to engage and contribute to the future planning of the Tropical Pacific Observing System, and that's what we're going to talk to you about today. So I'm just going to kick off and explain a little bit of the background and how we went about this evaluation. Toshio will then take over and talk really about the science that was discussed, but also the major recommendations that came out, and then I will come on again to talk about what we plan to do going forward. So and we're giving this talk on behalf of the broader scientific organizing committee of the TPOS workshop. and this presentation has been developed in consultation with them. So just quickly, here's the outline. We'll talk a little bit about the workshop and the planned TPOS 2020 project going forward, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the scientific background and how that's related to the major recommendations coming out. And then we'll talk about improving the next steps for improving the observing system and the governance and oversight of the tropical Pacific that's recommended to move forward with that. So in January this year, after a frantic few months of activity by a large number of people, we met in San Diego at Scripps. And here is the group of people that met there. There was 65 of us in total, and the names of the scientific organizing committee plus some independent adjudicators are there listed. And the meeting had a very strong international support. It was sponsored by the Global Climate Observing System, the Global Ocean Observing System, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, JAMSTEC, the State Oceanic Administration in China, and also KIOST in Korea. So we had some substantial support, and we really extremely grateful for that, and particularly the interest of SOA and KIOST in engaging in the future of tropical Pacific observing. So just to kind of go over the motivation for the workshop, as we all know, there's been, or many of you will know, there's been challenges in sustaining the tropical Pacific mooring array, the Tau Triton mooring array, over recent years, mostly related to the challenges securing ship time in both the US and in Japan. But also it's precipitated, it's timely for this kind of review because the scientific requirements from the observing system and the applications of the observations have evolved over the last 30 years since the observing system was designed during Toga. And there's an increased focus on biogeochemical and biological requirements in the region and the need for more multidisciplinary observations. And models, of course, have also evolved to higher resolution, coupled Earth system, data assimilation techniques, seasonal and ocean forecasting have all moved forward substantially in that time. And the observing system has also evolved with XPT lines being focused on transport monitoring, the Argo array coming into being, routine satellite observations were really not in place 30 years ago. And we have new and emerging technologies such as gliders and wave gliders, new sensor technology, and right through to kind of the tagging technology for fisheries and ecosystems. So all around it was timely for a systems-based evaluation of requirements and the implementation and delivery of the observations and how best to go about that. So the review and structure is detailed here, with the terms of reference of the review are based on the framework for ocean observing, very much focused on the requirements for essential ocean variables and the best way to deliver those. With 65 attendees from 30 institutions and 13 countries in attendance at the workshop. And we had 14 invited talks based on observing system requirements and implementation. And these were based on a set of white papers that were pulled together by the community. We also had 9 invited talks from agencies with an interest in the tropical Pacific observing system, both in observing the system, but also in the outputs, in using the data for delivering against their priorities. We had some very robust discussion sessions, plus closed sessions for the review committee to deliberate on how to move forward. And the review committee was made up of the scientific organizing committee plus 3 independents who were kind of brought in to provide some fresh perspective and independence to the process. The report and recommendations will be delivered to the meeting sponsors and will then be made more broadly available within the next week or so. That's now pretty much finalized. So the main recommendation, and those of you who are late at night, if you fall asleep after this, we'll forgive you, is the key recommendation is really the formation of a TPOS 2020 project to achieve the transition from a loosely coordinated set of ocean observing activities in the tropical Pacific to a systematic and sustained tropical Pacific observing system by 2020. And the project goals are here to refine and adjust the tropical Pacific observing system to monitor, observe and define the state of ENSO and improve scientific understanding, to support observation and prediction systems for ocean weather and climate services, including underpinning research, to advance and refine the tropical Pacific predictability, physical and biogeochemical and its climate impacts, and lastly to relate ocean and climate variability and change to marine biogeochemistry and biology and carbon budgets, food security and biodiversity. So I'll switch across to Toshio Suga now, who will provide more of the details of the science that was discussed and the recommendations that were for.
Okay. Yes, ENSO research and forecasting have been drivers for the observations of tropical Pacific. Since Bjerknes first suggested the feedback mechanism between weakened trade winds and the eastward extension of warm water along the equator, El Nino Southern Oscillation, ENSO, has been studied vigorously. El Nino, the ENSO warm event, and the La Nina cold event have been described very well, as shown in this schematics. During El Nino, the trade winds slacken, westerly wind bursts develop in the west of the basin, and the thermocline tilt flatten. The trade wind gradient of sea surface temperature across the tropical Pacific is reduced, and convection of the tropical Pacific moves eastward. The El Nino and the La Nina events shift the probability of droughts, floods, heat waves, and extreme weather around the globe, which affects marine and terrestrial ecosystems and fisheries as well. This provides a societal imperative to develop and improve prediction of their onset and evolution as part of seasonal forecasting systems, which has prompted a strong focus on ENSO research in the past 30 years. Okay, observations of tropical Pacific developed during the TOGA program has advanced an understanding of ENSO a lot. The ENSO observing system was designed during TOGA program. Then Tau buoy array was developed with support from US, Japan, France, Korea, and Taiwan, and largely complete by 1993, maintained by NOAA. When JAMSTEC came on board in 2000 to instrument the western component of the array with Triton moorings, the array became Tau Triton array. Then Tau transferred from PMEL to NDBC beginning in 2005. Okay, this slide shows how the Tau Triton array captured 2009, 2010 El Nino and La Nina, and illustrates the value of high-resolution data. These Hofmeier diagrams of zonal wind, sea surface temperature, and depth of 20 degrees Celsius outcomes identify essential features of ENSO, such as westerly wind burst, surface warming and cooling, and Kelvin wave propagation. Near the peak phase of El Nino, cooling by ASC heat flux, and in the west, and warming by the zonal advection in the middle, and warming by downwelling Kelvin waves in the east. At the termination phase of El Nino, we can see the cooling by upwelling Kelvin wave, and which is generated at the western boundary. This was detected like this. Then this is consistent with the so-called delayed oscillator theory. Okay. So El Nino is the most predictable year-to-year fluctuations of the climate system, because the way slow changes in the ocean content, heat content,
The conference is now locked.
precondition the system for warm and cold events to occur. The first successful El Nino prediction was in 1986, and now ENSO prediction is essential for delivering seasonal forecasts. Forecast models are now moderately skillful at up to 6 to 9 month lead times. But the predictability limited by model bias, errors in initial conditions, and weather noise. Okay, ENSO research and forecasting have been the main driver for the Tau Triton and the broader tropical Pacific observing system, and likely to continue to be so for the TPOS. But there is now increased focus on tracking the role of tropical Pacific Ocean in decadal variability and climate change. This panel, this long time series of El Nino, Nino 3.4 SST anomalies show the history of El Nino and La Nina events, and simultaneously this time series capture interdecadal modulation of ENSO. Okay, so this interdecadal shift corresponds to the phase shift of Pacific decadal oscillations. Causal interrelationship is still a challenge of research, which is also related to ENSO diversity, sometimes referred to as canonical and Modoki ENSO events. Ocean biogeochemistry is also important due to the role of the tropical oceans in carbon dioxide flux change. This map shows parametric mean sea air carbon dioxide flux for the reference year 2000, which is in non-El Nino condition. The tropical Pacific is major natural source of CO2 from the ocean to the atmosphere, contribute to nearly 70% of the global flux to the atmosphere. Internal variability of the sea air CO2 flux there is also a major source of CO2 flux variability in the global oceans. Because of these features, tropical oceans are also important to understand ocean acidification. Biology, including commercially important fisheries and marine conservations, are also strongly impacted by variability in the tropical oceans. This slide showing production estimates based on satellite observations illustrate how large the impacts are. Okay, as mentioned earlier, modeling of forecasting of ENSO have been accomplished to a certain degree. This panel shows El Nino predictions from August 2009 from number of forecast centers around the world. This is a time series of Nino 3.4 SST anomaly. The observation curve is here. There is quite diversity around the reality. The seasonal forecast, such as precipitation forecast, heavily depends on this ENSO predictability. Okay, what do models tell us about the observation? Model will never be prescriptive in observing system design due to the following reasons. Observing system evaluations are model dependent and only consider the value of the data in the assimilation. We should recognize the different lives of the one observation. Initialization of today's forecast, verification of yesterday, last month, last season forecast, monitoring of climate conditions, calibration of forecast in 5-year time and beyond, improved forecasting systems used in next decade. Tangible impact of the observation on all these aspects is not easy to quantify objectively. So, OC results should be considered in multimodal comparison activities. Okay, what is the current observing system status? This schematic shows current observations in tropical Pacific, which has many various components of observing network. And of course, the tau Triton array is a center of those observing system. But now, the tau Triton array is at risk. NOAA has not been able to maintain tau moorings through lack of ship time. JAMSTEC has begun to withdraw some of its Triton moorings. And now, El Nino events is just likely to occur just now. But we don't have enough functional buoys in the area where El Nino form. Integration of various observing components is very important. Repeat hydrography from the maintenance cruise for tau and Triton buoy has been very important. Shipboard CTD profiles and ADCP data have been collected during tau Triton maintenance cruise. CTD profiles decreased from over 370 per year, 2001 through 2006, to 160 per year, 2007 to 2012, and to 10 profiles in 2013. These shipboard CTD and ADCP data provide unique repeating meridional sections and estimates of equatorial upwelling. The shipboard data have been widely used for evaluating ocean and climate models also. So these are very important components of the observing system. And a complementarity between satellite and in situ observations is also important aspects of integration. Altimeters help decipher eddy and large-scale signals captured by sparse in situ data. Combined altimetry and in situ data bolster research on sea level, heat content, and mass changes. High-frequency moored data help the areas diurnal cycle in satellite data. In situ data are used in satellite carval. Blended satellite and in situ data deliver high-level value-added products. Okay, now new technologies are emerging. As mentioned before, the wave gliders and the sea gliders, ocean gliders are very promising to close gaps, to address new requirements, to reduce costs for observation, to improve resilience, and so on. By the way, we can see that nice guy, left bottom part, picture. He will be very important guy. Okay, and now I pass this microphone to Katie.
Okay, thank you, Toshio. So we'll now talk about the much awaited next steps as we move forward. So Toshio has highlighted some of the issues and challenges that have been identified. But during the meeting, we had a very strong, generous promise and offer from NOAA to return TAO to 80% data return as soon as possible. They were suggesting within the calendar year, but we're still in discussions to see how they go with that, with availability of shipping. There is also an urgent need to explore strategies to minimize the impact of the reduction of the Triton array, and there's been discussions of increasing the Argo deployments in the region to offset that in the short term while they look at other observing strategies using gliders and wave gliders. The communication and coordination among existing partners, it's identified, needs urgent attention to discuss the challenges and minimize the impact, and also talk about more innovative strategies. And discussions are needed to broaden the engagement in supporting the Tropical Pacific Observing System and enabling new partners to come on board. There's also a need to ensure sufficient redundancy to enable cross-platform color quality checks and mitigate against the risk of platform bias. There's some real dependencies on specific platforms at the moment. So, and in terms of recommendations for improving integration and delivery, there's a need to ensure that all components, including satellites, in situ observations, models, data and information management, are all considered part of the observing system, with satellites, for instance, around mission planning, and tracking global teleconnections and calibration and validation. But with servicing ships, the recommendation is that they're established to take a core set of observations that provide spatial integration and benchmark accuracies. And also there's the opportunity to do some other focused process and science work where time permits from those ships. Around 10% of the observing system efforts should be directed towards data and information management. That's a very strong recommendation. And the future Tropical Pacific Observing System should be accompanied by a small set of performance indicators that capture both the technical performance and the uptake and impact of the system data and information, particularly in terms of the ultimate socioeconomic impact. And I think what the Tropical Pacific has highlighted is the challenge that we have in sustaining the ocean observing system. We are trying to develop one ocean observing system, sustained ocean observing system that delivers to a range of applications, from research to operational. And you can consider that a bit of a spectrum, and there's a lot of dynamic and feedback between those the more fundamental research and development activities through to the systematic service delivery, and there's a lot that we can learn between the two. However, the way that observations are funded and coordinated generally through two different funding mechanisms. And in most countries, while governance systems are quite different country to country around the world, what is consistent is generally you have research agencies on the one hand and operational agencies on the other that house within often two different ministries. And while at a scientific level, there's a lot of collaboration once the discussion is around resources, the communication and connections there are not necessarily in place. And there are with important feedbacks between these two sectors, and we need to kind of maybe have a discussion about whether we can address that. And also, as we move forward, we need to acknowledge that the connections and divisions of responsibilities between these two mechanisms differ from country to country, while I think it's relatively consistent. And if you feel that these connections work well in your organizations, then we'd be interested to hear from you. But we often find that those discussions are not being had at a national level, and we need to think about how we can address that, and also be careful when we're talking about research versus operational, because that means very different things in very different countries. So what we're really trying to do is develop a sustained observing system that delivers to a range of applications. So in terms of moving forward with TPOS, we really see this as a cameo for the global ocean observing system. It's a very well observed region with very clear societal delivery and clear kickbacks into things which are important to society. And the governance of the tropical Pacific does need improving, and there's a recommendation that ongoing scientific oversight of the design, implementation and evaluation of TPOS and its components are required. Routine communication between nations and parties involved in developing and implementing TPOS is needed. A long-term plan is needed for dedicated servicing support for TPOS. And there's a need for the assessment of risk to the observing system, and associated mitigation efforts and options is needed, looking at things like redundancy and sensor diversity and that sort of thing. So this is a diagram of the proposed TPOS 2020 governance structure. So TPOS will be coordinated by a TPOS steering committee and supported by a resources forum, and the steering committee will be a scientific-based steering committee to provide the scientific oversight of the transition of the observing system through to 2020. So this is a short-term, limited lifetime redesign project. And the resources forum will be made up of representatives from the major organizations with an interest in observing the tropical Pacific. Now, this is quite a lean and dynamic governance structure. There will be a reporting connection to the GOOS steering committee. I haven't put in here the plethora of other acronyms and organizations that will need to be connected to. That includes Good Day Ocean View and modeling activities, JCOM through the Observations Coordination Group and the requirements for service delivery and other groups, and they will be connected to as needed, and particularly connected to through these task teams. The task teams that are listed here were identified as areas where more work is needed following the white paper process to develop requirements and further develop the design of the observing system, and focus on potentially proposing pilot projects and other activities to facilitate that redesign. And they are one looking at the development and evolution of developing and improving the broad-scale observing system. A diurnal and fluxus task team really focusing on that air-sea interface. A boundary regions task team, and there's been on and off discussions about the potential for a biogeochemical and biological task team, but at the moment it looks like we're going to really focus on trying to make those other task teams really truly multidisciplinary to improve that integration effort. There will also be a model forecasting and data assimilation task team. There will be a more ongoing activity because it's acknowledged that we still have systematic and persistent errors in the region in models, and we haven't progressed that in the recent, since the end of TOGA, the same errors there that have been there for a while. And it's also recognized that maybe the models are not extracting maximum benefit from the observing system. And also the need to bring in models to inform the observing system design into the future. So that's how things are going to go forward. This is a project that is expected to be independently funded as well. So that gives it that more lean dynamic structure so that the agencies with an interest in observing the tropical Pacific contribute funds to coordinate the observing system and extract maximum benefit from that investment. If you imagine the amount of funds that go into observations, a very small proportion of that would be needed to fund the coordination activity. So the other plan is that there would be a very small office with a project officer, or maybe one to 1.5 people to coordinate, and that would be funded through the project, and the meetings and efforts to establish this activity will be funded that way too, with much of the task team work being done offline and with meetings as needed. So just to highlight the interest in engaging and supporting TPOS, there's been interest highlighted at the meeting in supporting Tau Triton. So KIOS in Korea is interested in assuming shared responsibility of at least one of the Tau lines. IMAPE in Peru is interested in assuming shared responsibility of one of the Eastern Pacific lines. And other organizations have discussed possible collaborations and support in the Western Pacific. That's TORI in Taiwan, BMKG in Indonesia, and the State Oceanic Administration in China. So in developing TPOS, there's broad interest from many organizations to contribute to other elements of the TPOS, including Argo and drifters, and to improve the observing system through the use and trialing of emerging technologies such as gliders and wake gliders and more innovative mooring technology, for instance. And as I said, there's in terms of improving the requirements or assessing the requirements for TPOS 2020, there was a real reinforcement of the key priorities to identify and sustain the critical long climate records as a priority. And the unique contribution of the Tau Triton long time series in this context is recognized. The need to maintain and improve broad-scale sampling, taking into account all observing networks, and the need to encourage the integration of biogeochemistry and biology. And in identifying new requirements, those task team areas were identified. This is how these came up in terms of the eastern, western, and equatorial boundary regions. Observing diurnal variability in SE fluxes, and also the need to strengthen that connection to modeling through multi-system analysis activities, observing system design, and targeted process studies. So in terms of the next steps, we've finalized the white papers have been finalized and they're online, and we've completed the report and recommendations that is being sent in the next day or so to the sponsors, so it's hot off the press, with the main recommendation being establishing the TPOS project, and then the report will be available more broadly shortly afterwards. Mid this year, so we're in the process of establishing a TPOS steering committee, or proposing a TPOS steering committee. We're in discussions with two dynamic potential co-chairs at the moment. And they hopefully will be discussed with the sponsors and can be announced shortly. And it will probably be in the second half of this year, in the September to November timeframe, we will have the first meeting of the steering committee and the resources forum, and get some agreements in place in establishing TPOS and funding it going forward, and also move to establish these TPOS task teams. So particularly if you have interest in the task team activities, I encourage you to get in touch. When we provide the report, we'll make an announcement on the GOOS update, and the descriptions and focus of those task teams will be included in that report. Okay, so that's it. On behalf of the TPOS Scientific Organizing Committee, thank you very much for calling in. I know it's a very antisocial time for some. The website where all the white papers, presentations, and soon the report is right there on the slide, and my contact details are below if you require more information, and I will point you in the direction of the right person.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you, Toshio. I've just changed the screen layout a little bit, and there's a big question and answer window that you can see at the bottom below the slides. And I would encourage you to type your questions in that window rather than the chat window, although I have also captured quite a few of the questions from the chat window as they've come in over time. So I'm going to look at the question and answer window, look at the chat window, and ask questions of Toshio and Katie, and we'll continue the discussion that way for another 20 minutes or so. Let me start with a question for Toshio. You didn't really show this, but there is some evidence that maybe El Nino is emerging this year. Some of the forecast models are showing that, and we see a clear subsurface SST signal of the thermocline being pushed down, with warmer water spreading eastward across the Pacific, and some hints of that in the sea surface temperature in the Western Pacific now. So one question is just how do you think the forecast might be degraded by the present state of the observing system in the tropical Pacific?
Okay, that is very good, but a difficult question. And now maybe we can see, you know, how this a low return rate of the data from the tower how large the effect of that on the prediction is. This is kind of unfortunate experiment. You know, we can see how it's important is. Yeah. So at the moment, I have no clear answer for that.
Thanks, Toshio. You talked in your presentation about some of the emerging technologies that will help us improve how we observe, especially on the in situ side. What are some of those technologies that you are most excited by?
Yeah, so one example which during the workshop which emphasizes glider technology. It can be cover the area where the mooring is very difficult because of, for example, vandalism, and or remote area difficult to maintain the large equipment like a buoy. Glider may be maintained by nearby island with some small facility like that. So that kind of new technology may cover maybe fill the gap which we have now.
And while I have you speaking, let me just ask a pragmatic question. Federico Noguera has asked which organizations besides NOAA provides ship time to maintain the arrays in the tropical Pacific?
That is, I think that Katie showed that slides. Several, I mean, at least a few institutions have some interest to provide ship time for that. At the moment, I think no such institutions, but it's they are coming. Some institutions have interest to support for the ship time. That is our understanding.
So Katie, let me turn to you. We have a whole series of questions actually about the integration of TPOS, the Tropical Pacific Observing System, with other ocean basins and with the larger observing system, GOOS. So let's start with some of the more specific ones. The tropical variability in the Pacific, of course, has some impact and links with the tropical variability in the other ocean basins, the Indian Ocean and in the Atlantic Ocean. So is there any intent to coordinate with other similar projects such as Pirata, as with Rama and the rest of IOGOOS?
Yes, so during the through the Tropical Pacific Observing System workshop, we did engage with representatives from the Indian Ocean Observing System and from Pirata where we could. It was a challenge to get people to attend the meeting in person on that short time frame, but quite a few of them were involved in some of the white papers, and certainly the TPOS steering committee will be connecting out as needed to the coordination activities of.
And then a question more generally about how this project works. So the TPOS 2020 project, in a sense, and Eric clarified that in his chat comment, is a redesign project. It's meant to look at the tropical Pacific and really come up with an optimum design. But how do you think in GOOS we're going to be able to best coordinate different activities of this type that look at different aspects of adequacy for particular purposes and in particular regions into a wider context of global ocean observing system?
Well, I think that's a job for the three global panels and the GOOS steering committee. The OOPC was charged with this activity and is also identifying other activities where we might need to do some redesign work and evolution work and set up a process for the ongoing evaluation or a framework for ongoing evaluation in those regions, so we don't continue to try and develop a static observing system. At the end of the day, the equipment comes and goes, and what we're trying to develop are these long time series and refine and improve the observing system while maintaining the stability that we need for climate activities. So this is very much considered a process where we will spin this activity up, transition the observing system to something that's more robust and sustainable, and then it will fold in under the oversight of OOPC and the other expert panels, and we will provide that necessary oversight. The idea is we're not going to proliferate a whole bunch of new panels or working groups or activities. These are short-term focused activities. Moving forward as we reinvigorate the work of the Global Ocean Observing System, and also with the other two panels that the sibling panels to OOPC. So yes, I think that it's the job of the OOPC and the GOOS Physics panel and the Biogeochemistry and Biology panels from a disciplinary point of view, but also we have that oversight from the GOOS Steering Committee, and I think a lot of those links and connections will be discussed at that level. So Eric Lindström gave a talk on the deep ocean observing strategy last time. So there's certainly connections that will be needed to make between these activities.
Katie, both the Tropical Pacific Observing System project and the Deep Ocean Observing System project have identified the need to engage funders. So let me ask some questions about that. You're going to try to reach out to the present funders of the system and potential new funders. And how do you intend to do that? How broadly do you intend to do that? Do you intend to try to go to new entrant funders beyond the oceanographic funders and into ones that are interested in forecasting?
unmute myself. I think we do need to reach out to the range of organizations with an interest in the tropical Pacific, both in terms of contributing expertise and energy and experience, but also in the context of the resourcing for everything from doing the kind of the innovative pilot project work, testing new equipment, through to the kind of the workforce sustaining work and the optimum use of ships in the region. So our plan is to reach out to any organizations with an interest in this region for a range of contributions, not just cold hard cash. And we are in negotiations more broadly. So this year we have the World Meteorological Organization Executive Council in June, and we have a side event there so that we can start a conversation with the Met services, particularly because the main buzzwords around WMO and at the moment is the formation of this global framework for climate services. And that is really going to lean on the information on that seasonal time frame from the tropical Pacific to support those services and critical decision makings that need to be had on those time frames. So so that's going to be an interesting conversation, and there's also potentially a plan for an IOC side event to engage at member nation level in IOC as well. And so we will spin up some discussions around once we've got the main funders agreed on the TPOS, the main sponsors of the actual workshop, to be on board and approve the recommendations, then we can start a conversation with interested organizations about how we move forward and how they would like to engage. So I would really encourage those online to start any conversations within their organizations with regard to how they might want to.
Katie, so then is the deliverable, since you're going to be engaging the funders, is the deliverable of the TPOS 2020 project a design plan for the observing system, or a design plan plus an implementation plan, including funding commitments from those bodies?
I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. It needs to be both, and what we need is a mechanism to have those communications about how best to use not just a systems-based approach to the observing system design, but a systems-based approach to its implementation, and what is the best use of available resources to ensure the observing system is more than a sum of its parts. So how do we make the best use of the ships in the region to service the raid and the interests of the agencies involved? How can we bring those interests and priorities together in a way that makes sense to them and makes sense to TPOS as a whole? How best do we anticipate the evolution of satellite activities and develop the observing system to make the most of those innovations in satellite observations? Yes, I would say it's the need to take a systems-based approach to both the design and the implementation, and have a plan for how we coordinate that going forward. And of course, JCOM will have a strong role in this. You know, the Observations Coordination Group is the representation of the major observing networks globally, and the conversations about how we can connect up and implement there is important. The connection to data and information and service delivery will be useful through the services program area of JCOM. And then we also have JCOM Ops, the technical coordination office, where there is also a new position, which is a ships coordinator, and so that will be a particularly interesting discussion to have with them in terms of how they can support the coordination of shipping resources in the region, because often to date that's done on an ad hoc basis, where one PI will call out and say, right, well, I've got a ship going here, does anybody want to deploy gliders or Argo floats or drifters, and it's often a PI to PI scientist.
And if I could make a comment here as
There's a lot of
well,
those
the steering committee of
implementation
GOOS will be meeting in late July this year, and it is going to be one of the major topics of consideration, which is how a concept of GOOS projects can fit into the improvement of the design of a GOOS as a whole, and really the improvement of the implementation of GOOS as a whole, but how to fit these projects into an overall structure of GOOS. We already have that challenge with GOOS Regional Alliances and how they contribute to a global GOOS, and we'll have this challenge now with these sort of projects that are taking forward pieces of the observing system in terms of improving their design and trying to put some energy into their implementation. Let me ask some questions of Toshio now. You focused a lot on the seasonal variability of the tropical Pacific, El Nino, La Nina. What about decadal variability? What about global change? What needs to be on the radar of this committee as they look to requirements in that respect?
Yes, decadal variability, decadal pollution is we understand that is a major challenge, and TPOS will provide essential data for that model development for those purposes, and understanding a process for the which is necessary for the model development. So the TPOS provide data with various type of data, broadcast data, and more high frequency data, and so all those data will be a great source for the research to improve the decadal predictability, and also the high quality climate data which the TPOS provide will be essential source of information for the climate change research and monitoring. That is all included in our main agenda in our TPOS 2020.
And how do you think OPC and the other panels of GOOS need to work to try to capture the different requirements or different uses of the observing system and try to combine them into one recommendation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is that is very challenging task, and that is why that framework for ocean observing is created, and now we work on not only not on a particular platform or phenomena, but work on essential ocean variables, and we use those common language readiness level, which all those are in a framework for ocean observing, and we use those common language and infrastructure. I mean that intellectual infrastructure to manage to sort out the different requirements from different communities. Yeah, but that is that is a big challenge. That is totally new challenge, and we need the broad help from the broad community and understanding of this, what we are trying to do. And I think TPOS is and also GOOS will be a good exercise, and maybe that a practice which we can show the people how this idea, how this concept work really in the real world. Yeah, that is our intention.
Alex Genosho asks about the impact of the atmospheric observations in the Caltriton book. They've been considered in the process as well.
Okay. This is Alex. Hi, Alex. That yes, the atmospheric observation is important, but not probably that the satellite winds data is, we didn't have that 30 years ago, but now we have satellite data. So that in some sense, the satellite data may cover to some extent. But Taut, Wright, and Bui provide a concurrent observation of atmosphere in the ocean. That is very important for the research on that. I mean that needed to the developing for example, coupled model. So that Taut, Wright, and Bui's I mean that concurrent observation of atmosphere in the ocean by Taut, Wright, and Bui is very important.
Thank you, Toshio. And I'm just going to ask one final question, even though we've run out of time for a bit. Adrian Simmons asked, and this is both for Katie and for Toshio. The subtitle of this talk is A Future Sustained TPOS for Research and Forecasting. So you don't mention climate monitoring, and Adrian argues that these days goes beyond research. They're setting up operational services under Copernicus in Europe. The global framework for climate services is not about research. Is there any comment there?
So I can comment if you like. So that was the title that was provided. I guess that was the initial title of the workshop, and there was numerous long titles for that workshop discussed. But I would really focus on what came out of the workshop, and the focus of those TPOS 2020 project goals, which really do highlight the need to connect to climate services. And as I mentioned, we are planning this the side event at the WMO Executive Council, really linking the need for the tropical Pacific observations to the GFCS, and I would argue that they're essential for the GFCS mission. I think that your comments are very well.
All right, thank you very much to Katie and to Toshio for your presentation this morning. It's been very useful, very interesting. I think the audience online has thanked you as well, and I'm sure everyone who hasn't typed thanks you as well. I would like just to talk about for a moment about the next GOOS webinar, which is not next month, but in fact this month, in only 3 weeks' time. Friday the 23rd of May at 1300 GMT, and you can go look on the GOOS website to calculate when that is for you. This will be by Brian King, who's an Argo steering team member and at the National Oceanography Centre in the UK, and he'll be talking about the evolution of the Argo profiling float network. So again, thank you to Katie and Toshio, and thank you to everyone for joining us for this GOOS webinar, the third in the series. If you missed some of the older ones, you can now download the recordings on the GOOS website. And I encourage you to go look. This one will be online in a few days. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.